Here's to love. And here's to the time when we were little girls. No one asked us to marry.
If she had not been nominated and won for Mildred Pierce in 45, I believe she would have not only have been nominated for Possess, which she was, but she would have won for this, because it is her finest performance.
I told you once I'd do anything to keep you from leaving me, and I will. Anything.
Well, any jailbreak is pretty tough, but I think I can manage this one.
You'll see. I can be very objectionable.
That I can believe.
Bette's last film for Warner's is Beyond the Forest, and it's completely tied into her leaving Warner's early. In the middle of filming, she decided, I do not want this on my resume. I am not finishing this movie. And she said, I'll tell you what. I'll finish your movie. You let me out of my contract. She did, and they did.
And you can put that in your oil well and pump it.
When Bette Davis left Warner Brothers, she simply drove away, and she thought there would be a big party. She thought she would get a watch. She thought people would come out and say something to her. But actually, she drove away, and that was it.
I find all this very distasteful.
Bette Davis very much wanted to be the first performer to win 3 Academy Awards, and it looked like she might have the chance. She wanted it for Dark Victory, didn't get it. Then she made her huge comeback in All About Eve, and she really felt she would win. But she was up against another legendary performance, Gloria Swanson, in her comeback, first movie to speak of since the silent era as Norma Desmond in Sunset Boulevard.
All About Eve put her back in the forefront of Hollywood actresses, and she may never have topped that, but she showed that she could do it. She showed that she could come back, and she never stopped.
Well, if you're a star, you don't stop being a star.
Joan Crawford definitely worked more steadily than Bette Davis did in the 50s. They both considered it a black period because they were not protected by a studio anymore.
So by the time Baby Jane came along, even though it was Grand Guignol, sort of a shocker, the kind of thing they wouldn't have considered 10 years before, they were starring roles. It would be distributed by Warner Brothers, and they jumped at the chance.
And Robert Aldrich had originally bought the property of Baby Jane and approached Crawford, and he said, well, you know, if I wanted to do this, we really need somebody like Bette Davis.
And apparently the deal was struck, but only if Bette Davis got to be the lead character and Joan Crawford played the character in the wheelchair.
He then had to find a studio to do it, and they were turned down everywhere.
Jack Warner didn't like the idea of Baby Jane because bringing these two women together to him was a big mistake.
You know, I always wanted everything to be nice, don't you?
Robert Aldrich saw the publicity advantage of bringing together these famed women who, with this big rivalry in one production, would get him all the publicity he needed to launch his picture.
Warner's Seven Arts decided to produce the film if it could be done on a very low budget.
How about $100? A week, of course.
Well, now the two were finally unleashed in the same ring.
You wouldn't be able to do these awful things to me if I weren't still in this chair. But you are, Blanche. You are in that chair.
There was no feuding on the set. It was all off the set. They were total professionals.
You know, I always wanted everything to be nice, don't you?
There was a war of dominance between these two sort of alpha females. Ultimately, because she was the more versatile actress, Davis got the director on her side. And so I think Crawford began to feel more edged out, and it was a much better part.
They were out to get each other. A lot of times they worked really well together, but every once in a while some unprofessional behavior appeared on the scene out of both of them, which was really out of character. They seemed to bring it out in each other.
The performances for both of them in Baby Jane, I think, were basically reflective of their careers and the kind of actresses they were. Bette, you know, just chewed the scenery and chewed the staircase and chewed every single thing that she could find. She went to extremes with her costumes. Both stars had costume and makeup and hair approval. In fact, Bette Davis was wearing a blonde wig in the movie that had been borrowed from the MGM wardrobe department and had been worn by Joan Crawford in an earlier movie, but Bette never knew that.
When Joan Crawford was shown the designs for the dresses that she was to wear in Baby Jane, she resisted because she wanted to look more glamorous. But Norma Koch, who was the costume designer, convinced Miss Crawford that her character would not wear glamorous costumes. After all, she's been in a wheelchair for many years. And then Crawford agreed that that's the way she should look. Nevertheless, she still wanted to wear falsies, so that at the end of the movie, when she's lying down on the beach, her breasts wouldn't naturally fall to the side the way any woman's would when they're lying down. And Bette Davis had to, at one point, fall on top of Joan Crawford, and these fake breasts were not falling down to the side of her body. They were sticking up, as Joan planned. And Bette said they feel like two footballs having to fall on top of them.
When I'm very bad and answer back and sass, then I'm Mama's little devil, and Papa says I've got the brass.
This film totally transformed them. Of course, it also set them up on a cycle of horror suspense films that became more and more tawdry. Baby Jane was a huge surprise sleeper hit.
On its initial release, I think people were shocked that these two established stars, there they were together for the first time, abusing the hell out of each other, and moving an audience.
All this time we could have been friends.
Whatever Happened to Baby Jane really is on the short list of all-time great camp cult classics. First of all, it's the showdown of these two rather monstrous, great stars, and both women have, great gay followings. So it's the championship match. The film itself is so outrageous. It's kind of like the tacky daughter of Sunset Boulevard.
Baby Jane is a quality film with quality performances. It's much more than a horror film. It's a tragedy of great proportions. Joan plays her role straight, and she plays it for sympathy, and she gets it. Baby Jane, as played by Bette Davis, is played like an ancient drag queen. But also, there's something very, very sad there. She's almost retarded and stifled in her upbringing. She self-medicated herself into severe alcoholism, and she doesn't know reality from reality anymore. She still is, in her mind, a little girl. And she believes this, and you believe it from her.
Bette and Joan in this movie are really brave performers. They are abandoning their glamorous images and coming out as these shock queens. Bette got nominated for the Best Actress Oscar. Joan did not. But Joan managed to wangle herself into having the job of accepting the Oscar for Anne Bancroft in case Anne Bancroft won.
So, at the night of the awards, Bette Davis, again, so confident, she was right in the wings with her purse, ready to stride on stage when they said, and the winner is Bette Davis. Joan Crawford was also in the wings, and the winner is Anne Bancroft for The Miracle Worker. Joan Crawford looked at Bette Davis, smirked, supposedly said, "Excuse me, I have an Oscar to accept."
They just didn't love you enough.
Both of these women beat the odds in that they grew up in a very sexist industry where eventually male stars totally dominated. But these women extended their careers almost to their deaths, and until her death in the case of Bette Davis. They kept reinventing themselves. They did interesting projects. They took risks. They were really pioneers. They were strong women. And once they were of a certain age, they didn't look back.
I think that Bette Davis and Joan Crawford, and the reason we still love them, is because they had goals that they set out for, and they achieved them. And the goals were as simple as entertaining your audience. They entertain their audiences 50, 60 years after they've made pictures, just as much as they entertained them when they made them for contemporary audiences. Quality entertainment endures throughout the years, and both of them created a body of work that's not going to be forgotten.